Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
We're recording on Thursday. We are 24 hours away from Trump's vice presidential pick, so apologies if our conversation is rendered outdated more quickly than usual. It would be unfair of me, Matt, to force you to make a prediction when you'll be proven right or wrong instantaneously.
Well, I've already made a prediction here, though. I made a prediction here.
Who did you predict?
Weeks ago. I predicted Newt.
Okay, so you still got a shot here being proven right.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Though
Yeah.
lots of indications that it's Pence, Governor Mike Pence. But again, not knowing who it's going to be, what do you think it means if he picks Pence or if he picks Gingrich?
Okay. And then we should also say, I think Christie's in the mix, and there's also just the possibility for a surprise pick. But I do think you're right that the two leading contenders, I think, are clearly Pence and Gingrich. I think that my argument for Gingrich is that he, the argument against Pence and the argument for Gingrich is that I think that Pence will have a harder time defending Donald Trump's positions. I think Newt can interpret them and sort of take them, make them more eloquent, make them more academic, and really drink the Kool-Aid in a sense and double down on them and be persuasive in defending Trump's policies. I don't know that Pence has that ability to do that. The other problem with Pence, in my opinion, is that I think that although he has this perception that he's a great conservative, in the past year or two he's lost a lot of his conservative bona fides, and so you have people like Rich Lowry and Eric Erickson and Ben Shapiro and Amanda Carpenter, sort of saying we don't think it should be Pence, and some of them, people like Eric Erickson, certainly Erickson and Shapiro and Amanda Carpenter, are basically saying, this guy, he just doesn't have the toughness. He's too wishy-washy. He sort of backtracked on the RFRA, the religious liberty issue in Indiana, when the going got tough there. And then his endorsement of Ted Cruz was so milquetoast and tepid that I think he sort of lost some of the conservative credentials he had in Congress.
I mean, it seems to me that Newt would be, in kind of the Clinton Gore way, Newt is sort of doubling down on Trump's personality. We're going to have two ginormous blowhards barnstorming the country.
As Newt said today, do you want a ticket with two pirates?
Right.
I like that.
And if your argument is that you need a personality like that to change Washington, and you believe as a political strategy, saying crazy things to keep you in the media is what the modern media environment demands. Newt does that for you more. Pence is just going to fade into the background, which many vice presidential nominees in history do. That's not an unusual tack for a presidential nominee to take. It just seems sort of incongruous with who Trump is.
I think the allure for Trump is, in a way, Pence is a conquest. Pence is somebody who is generally, he's a sitting governor, and to sort of get Pence on your team is in a way a conquest. It's a vanquishing the enemy in a sense. I mean, this is a guy who sort of obviously supported, albeit very tepidly, Ted Cruz, and whereas Newt is somebody who, although Newt his in fairness to Newt has stood up to Trump on occasion and criticized him.
On the comments about the Mexican-American judge, Newt was very
yes, yes, but I think with Newt, it's someone who otherwise has really been very clear about wanting to be the running mate. But I think, in fairness to Newt, look, he is brash and he does say controversial things, but I think he does it in a much more sophisticated way and a much more defensible way than Donald Trump does.
Like when he called Obama the food stamp president. That was very high-minded.
Okay, point well taken. But I think that Newt has the ability to be like the explainer-in-chief of Trump, to sort of take Trump's ideas and basically like, look, here's what he really means. And then to sell it in a typical Newtonian grandiose fashion, but in a way that I think conservative policy intellectuals and opinion leaders will be much more susceptible to believing. So I think he can be like the Trump whisperer or something.
But if he picks Pence, I mean, the one sort of intriguing aspect about him picking Pence in my mind is that's the kind of thing that a traditional political candidate who is trying to win would do. So if he picks Pence, does it mean that he's actually trying to win as opposed to I'm just trying to like have fun and and burn stuff down along the way, which what a Newt pick or a Christie pick might suggest?
Well, I think if he's trying to win, he would probably pick Susanna Martinez or Nikki Haley.
Well, but they wouldn't. And they're not even. They wouldn't take it.
Well, they wouldn't now. But if he had pivoted after, I think that after he could have done everything he did and said all the crazy things he said. But if he had pivoted, a month and a half ago after becoming the presumptive nominee, he might have been able to get them. But not now. You're right. Not now. They wouldn't accept it. And so I think that we are where we are. And Mike Pence, Mike Pence is facing a difficult reelection. He may not be able to win reelection in Indiana. And
kind of crazy in of itself. Why can't a Republican win in Indiana of all places?
Yes.
Why would you want damaged goods on your ticket? You can't even bring his home state.
But there does seem to be a correlation between people who are sort of at the end of their careers and people who are supporting Donald Trump. It will be interesting at the convention. There will be people like Ted Cruz and Tom Cotton and Paul Ryan speaking at the convention, and you can imagine that they won't really say anything good about Trump. I assume they're just going to bash Hillary for the obvious reason.
Now, your point about Martinez and Haley, I think is interesting because, and I'll preface by noting, as we said in the past, it is sort of ridiculous to analyze Trump as if he was a traditional political candidate and apply traditional political analytic criteria on him. But isn't it just total malpractice that he hasn't put a single woman on his short list?
Well, I think even if you what's the Rooney Rule in football where you have to interview like a minority head coach, even if you're not going to have no intention of hiring them. There should be like a Rooney Rule for vice presidential picks. I mean, even if he wasn't going to pick one, then there is okay. So maybe Joni Ernst wouldn't go through with the charade, but what about Jan Brewer or Sarah Palin or Mary Fallon? I mean, surely he could have leaked that he was leaning toward picking one of these female candidates, and there's been really no effort to do that.
Well, even just beyond the show aspect. I mean, I feel a lot of the Trump process has been for show, far more so than I think any presidential nominee since Walter Mondale, and that process was pretty panned for being very showboaty and trying to like touch all these constituencies in a very public way and leave a lot of people hanging. But I think it's crazy that Trump isn't seriously considering a woman on the merits. I mean, I thought he'd pick.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. Like the first crazy thing is that he's not considering one sincerely. The second crazy thing, though, is that he's not doing it just for window dressing. Like, at least have if you're not going to really consider it, at least have the common decency to, to pretend.
I mean, with Paul Manafort, when this first came up, Manafort made a comment that if he did pick a woman, it would be pandering, and therefore he wasn't going to do it. Then he kind of walked that back to some degree, but that does seem to be the predominant thinking, that if you're not even going to, because there are qualified women that could be vetted. It's not like they don't exist. They seem to go out of their way to not do it, and.
I mean, honestly, the most speculation has probably been about Ivanka Trump as his running mate, more than anybody else.
But if they're that trapped in this kind of, paleo thinking, I mean, this is very 69-year-old white conservative male thinking, that sure, women might be qualified, but to do it would be obvious pandering. Therefore, I'm going to treat them as a lesser option, just strictly by their gender. I mean, that's that kind of thing would not happen by a 45-year-old candidate. It just sort of suggests that he's not even trying to go beyond his core base.
We don't know that to be. It may just be he's going with people that he's personally comfortable with, and it just so happens that he's more comfortable with older white men. I mean, Chris Christie is like the young guy. I mean, it's Newt, who's in his 70s. It is Jeff Sessions, who is, Newt Gingrich without the ideas. Mike Pence. I don't know. He looks like he's. I don't know how. Who knows how old Mike Pence is, really?
I have not seen his birth certificate, so I can't say.
He's looked the same. Yeah, I think we need to really look at this birth certificate. But anyway, he has a type. I think all of us have a type, and he's got a type. So
VP aside, it's Thursday, so we are 4 days away from the convention. You are going to be there in Cleveland. I did not get a credential. I will not be there.
I'll be at an undisclosed location in Cleveland.
What are you hearing? We're getting some reports.
Toledo was booked. They couldn't get Toledo, right?
We're getting some reports that there's going to be an attempt to deny him the nomination on the floor. There's talk about a move to erase the entire platform coming from the more socially moderate faction of the party. Not that I think either of those gambits will succeed, but what are you hearing as far as the chances of it at least being disruptive for the convention?
Well, I continue to, for those who have been loyal fans here, I continue to be skeptical of this effort, because nothing that they have done, nothing that the Stop Trump movement has done, has demonstrated to me that they have the competence or the passion to actually pull anything off. Furthermore, there's no alternative. I don't know if I talked about this before or not, but Ted Cruz would be the obvious guy to go to if they were going to try to somehow wrest control from Trump. And why would Cruz want to do this? Ted Cruz wants Donald Trump to lose, and he wants to run in 2020. Like, that would be I think Cruz sees this as like his 1976, and he's Reagan.
But short of that, having an actual alternative and actually getting to that point, do you think it will be disruptive enough that you'll have a day of the convention where it's going to be an open question whether they're going to change the rules for being bound or not, and you'll get a parade of delegates, even if it is a faction of 100 delegates? That can still take up a lot of time on TV, going up to the microphone and bashing Trump for the day, when normally these events are scripted coronations.
I think we have to root for that, Bill. I think for the TV, for the entertainment purposes, we have to root for that. I don't know. I think it's more likely that there'll be some sort of a disruption from protests outside the security perimeter. That, I mean, if I were betting, like, what's the bigger story going to be? Is it, a coup attempt, within the convention, or is it some sort of disruption outside the convention from, leftist agitators? I would bet on the latter, I think. But who knows? You could have both. I mean, it's possible.
And one last convention question for you before we shift topic. But I saw the preliminary speakers list for the convention, and there's been a rough draft of the schedule for the night, so it doesn't seem super firm yet. The two things sort of struck me. One, I was reading the list, and I just was kind of meh. Like, I was sort of expecting Trump to be, balls out reality TV, enormous spectacle, the craziest possible political event you could imagine. I look at the speakers list, and it's a bunch of no names. I mean, there was no celebrity wattage at all. So that I don't know. Maybe there'll be surprises. So maybe I'm speaking prematurely here. And the other thing that struck me was the first night is designed to be Benghazi night, which does that mean we get a bobblehead? I mean, that's such a macabre imagery. Maybe, okay. Strike that from the record, Bill. Now, we are seeing in a CBS New York Times poll today, maybe we should talk about this some more, that Clinton taking a pretty big hit following the FBI declaration. It seems like the extremely careless jab is hurting her more than being exonerated. So she dropped 7 points in the poll from 47 to 40. Trump dropped 1 from 41 to 40, so they're tied. And Trump is really not getting out of the low 40s in almost any poll going back months now. So it's not like it's super great news for Trump, but I could see him saying, look, we drew some blood here on the emails. But going back into the Benghazi thing strikes me. We went through the whole Benghazi stuff in the fall, and Hillary beat that back pretty handily. Is this another example of Trump being trapped in the conservative echo chamber?
I think every speaker should get up and say, you didn't build that, or, yeah, it's weird. I mean, I bet you that some of the people who supported Trump thought that his star power would translate into, like, all of these endorsements from, maybe not A-list celebrities, but, like, legitimately famous people who are really interesting, who might speak at the convention. And I don't know. I guess we're going to get, like, Bobby Knight, maybe. I didn't see him on the list.
Yeah, I didn't see Knight, or I didn't see Mike Tyson, didn't see Don King. But I don't see Republican politicians.
But, like, not that they're,
you would expect to really kick up a lot of dust.
But you could imagine that in a different world, that I wonder. I mean, there's a lot of things I wonder about. So, like, what if Donald Trump had done this minus the racism? Like, it's possible that he could have tapped into some of the same things he tapped into. So the populist message, talking about protectionism, about but having not gone so far, not veered into racism. I mean, had he done that, now look, celebrities are hesitant to weigh into politics, especially against Democrats. I mean, against liberals. But I wonder what the potential of him actually tapping into his celebrity friends might have been. We'll never know. But that would be an interesting kind of counterfactual. Like, what if? I mean, what if Trump had pulled this off, but in just a better way? What might this race look like?
If only Donald Trump was a completely different person and not a racist jerk.
No, I think if he had just toned, don't you think, like, he could have just toned it back like 20-25%?
I mean, you can be theoretical about that, but not just Trump. Nothing in the way the Republican Party has behaved in the last 8 years has suggested enough balance and forethought to calibrate themselves in such a way to hit that sort of sweet spot. They've always been jerked around by the most cantankerous and incendiary elements of the party. I mean, the reason why Trump is where he is that faction of the party has been calling the shots for a long time.
Yeah. No, although, I mean, they have been able to nominate. Yeah, someone did. But they did nominate Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, and I think that, I mean, on one hand, you're right that I think the 47% mistake was a result of pandering to that base, which includes donors. But they did nominate Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, not that long ago, 4 years ago.
Well, that's why I thought Trump was. I would have thought cooler heads would have prevailed.
By the way, there's
a long time ago, but clearly that's not where the party mentality is right now. I mean, again, as I've said before, I mean, Trump got 45% of the primary vote. He locked up when he was at 40. I do think a stronger candidacy could have consolidated the anti-Trump faction, but it is the faction that is the most unhinged, which produced Trump.
Right.
So let's shift over to the Democrats. It was the big Unity Day on Tuesday. I wrote a piece about this for Politico that nobody read, so forgive me if I recap it. But I mean, if you said a year ago, I mean, it was 8 years ago where the Republicans were trying to attack Obama as a socialist. McCain called Obama a socialist during the race. Democrats got all panicky when that type of language is being tossed around. Now, 8 years later, it is a moment of celebration for the nation's leading Democratic socialists to get up on a stage and praise Hillary Clinton to the skies. And you don't even see that much attacking from Republicans by it because they want to get Bernie's votes. So,
yeah.
So in that sense, I mean, it's a dramatic advancement for the populist left for him to get to that point. However, and this was the thesis of what I wrote at Politico, this comes on the heels of a pretty big loss in the platform committee over the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, the Bernie folks can rightly say, well, we look at all the things that we did win. We won $50 minimum wage. We won Glass-Steagall. We won financial transaction tax. There's a lot of stuff in there. I mean, Bernie's team got to write a lot of the platform. There's no question about that. But the TPP thing was, number one, the issue that Bernie spent most of his time and political capital on trying to win. And two, it's the one issue out of all these that is a live issue before Congress right now. And many believe that how this proxy battle went within the Democratic Party would have an impact on whether Obama can get it passed in the lame duck session. So for Bernie and Obama, according to the Washington Post, had a meeting in June after the California primary where Bernie said to Obama, I'm going to fight the DPP in the platform. And Obama said, I'm not going to allow you to oppose the TPP in the platform. And Obama won that fight. So there's this question whether, as far as Bernie's faction has gone, I said in the piece, I think he has sharpened the points of the progressive North Star. They want Glass-Steagall. They want financial transaction tax. They want free college. They want, more robust public option or Medicare for all for healthcare. All those things. So they have things that they are marching towards or want to march towards. But when it comes down to actually defeating the Democratic establishment when it counts, be it in the California primary or the New York primary or the Ohio primary or in the TPP fight in the platform committee, they haven't really figured out how to do that yet. So I do think there's a bridge for that faction to cross that they haven't figured out how to cross yet.
Well, one thing's for sure. I mean, socialism has been mainstreamed, which is very concerning. But things are changing in America, and a nationalist and a socialist walk into a convention.
Well, I think just excuse me if I'm repeating myself, but I think yes, the stigma of socialism has been demonstrably diminished. Clearly, younger voters, I mean, looked at it broadly, is less spooked by the word. But by the TPP fight, that also suggests it's not that the country is turning socialist today. There are impediments to actually implementing the most pure form of that agenda when the rubber hits the road.
Right.
Does that make you feel better?
Well, yeah. I mean, granted, not everybody's going to have the youthful charisma of a Bernie Sanders to sell this message, so we can take solace there.
I mean, it was, George McGovern, of course, came up far shorter than Bernie Sanders did, but the biggest product of the McGovern campaign was Bill and Hillary Clinton. Those are the McGovernites that have gotten as far in presidential politics. Gary Hart before that, and Gary Hart wasn't all that left
who was
either.
The manager. Yeah.
There is a notion, I think, within the Sanders movement that they are generationally preordained to triumph over time, and the McGovern.
What? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And Dave Hopkins, who's a political scientist, said in Vox, and I quote him in my piece. The McGovernites didn't win the future. I mean, they might have moved the party left in certain aspects, but the next Democrat was Jimmy Carter, who came from more of the conservative side of the party. The next Democrat was Bill Clinton, who preached a third way moderation. It wasn't the party really didn't move left until Obama, and Obama's version of liberalism is not as far left as McGovern's or Bernie Sanders is. So you don't know that the Sanders generation is going to maintain its level of leftist thought as they get older. A Hillary Clinton presidency, if it goes well, it might strengthen the forces of moderation, and if it goes poorly, we might swing far to the right. So there's all sorts of ways things can go from here.
There's a libertarian argument that I do not think was fully employed against the populist economics, and it goes like this. The argument is that, and this is why libertarians will often push back and say, no, we're not isolationists. But the argument says that if you trade with people, that you're less likely to go to war with them. That trading, that free trade and that trading with other countries has benefits that transcend economic benefits. And I think the economic benefits are pretty obvious. But even putting that aside, that there's something about trading with other countries that makes you less likely to be, bellicose. And I don't know that anyone really used that argument against Trump. Now, he would have just, I guess, deflected and said, hey, I am for free trade, just, China's, whatever, manipulating the currency or whatever. But, that is an interesting argument, because a lot of the people who are kind of, anti-interventionist peaceniks are now also anti-free trade. And you could certainly argue that that's inconsistent.
Well, I think that, the Democrats were the free traders going back 100 years. And that was mostly on economic grounds. I mean, it was, we talked about this before, the McKinley protectionists were protecting American businesses. The Bryanite populists were free traders to help the farmers have their prices be lower. But Woodrow Wilson fused those two points in wanting to have a global free trade system that would be a disincentive to war, and FDR, picked up that baton also, and that was also the impetus for the European Union. And I think that's why many are unnerved by Britain leaving, because it pulls out a Jenga piece that might make that project collapse over time. But I notice sometimes people on the left, point to comments that Democrats in the 40s, 50s, and 60s said in favor of letting multinational corporations, have a a lot of sway in a global trade regime to suggest that they were sort of corrupted and corporatist from the beginning. But that actually was always an argument to say we want to have bonds that cross country borders to diminish the incentive for war. And I suspect that the Obama White House doesn't have a lot of high hopes for TPP economically speaking. Most analysis suggests it's not really going to impact the global economy, the American economy, one way or the other. I think their main impetus really is national security and geopolitical, wanting to be a major player in Asia and constrain the rise of China, which they think is good for global peace. But those sorts of high-minded, sophisticated arguments are not really going to get a lot of traction in the current environment.
What are they trying? I mean, have they even tried to sell that argument?
Not in a broad way. I think made in certain elite corners. They certainly are making the argument that's not going to help much economically. I mean, Obama's leaning in and saying this will be very good for jobs. So, and I think they understand that almost everybody looks at it in terms of zero-sum economics. No one's going to be sold by a geopolitical argument.
Right. Well, this may be a good time to push some of my recent podcasts.
Please.
Because I had a guy on named J.D. Vance who wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of family and a culture in crisis. That kind of dovetails some of these questions about so many working class white Americans generally supporting Donald Trump. So that's cool. But, I think that I mentioned Sebastian Junger came on to talk about Tribe, and Walter Shapiro came on to talk about his new book, Hustling Hitler. Do you know about this, Bill? Do you know Walter?
I don't.
So Walter Shapiro.
Well, I know Walter Shapiro is, but I don't know.
You know Walter? Okay. Sort of a veteran political journalist, but he has a book called Hustling Hitler. It turns out his uncle was a Jewish vaudevillian who ripped off the Fuhrer, who was involved. He was a con artist, and he ended up selling him what was supposed to be nickel that they needed for their guns, but in fact it was just scrap metal. And he's written a book about that. So we talked about that on the podcast.
Walter's a great guy to follow on Twitter, by the way.
He's a funny, smart, and humorous guy, and I guess maybe the vaudevillian uncle. Maybe he channeled his humor and his talents into a more productive politics, as opposed to his great uncle, who seemed to be. The funny thing is that all the different people that overlap in this story of Hustling Hitler include all sorts of fame, like Mae West is involved in this, and Kafka's cousin is involved in this. There's a lot of sort of like celebrities of a certain era who knew his uncle and who were involved in this story. But the one I would, for this audience, I think the one I would call your attention to is the Hillbilly Elegy memoir by J.D. Vance, which really helps explain why people from Appalachia, are huge Trump fans.
All right, go check out the Matt Lewis podcast, and that podcast has been on fire for some time. So if you're not subscribing to it, you should.
Yes, and Bill, you've been writing away at Politico magazine and Real Clear Politics.
Yeah, I did have a Real Clear Politics piece this week on Trump and trade. I should have mentioned that earlier. A little known poll number that came out last week asking which candidate makes you confident or uneasy about their ability to handle international trade. Hillary's uneasy number was 47%. Trump's was 61%. So I explore why it is. Everyone's assuming that trade is a potential weapon for Trump to win the Rust Belt from the Democrats, but other aspects of the Trump message and the Trump persona appear to be undercutting him from actually wielding that weapon effectively. So that's a Real Clear Politics. And check out my Politico piece, Bernie's endorsement.
Well, I always thought Bernie's endorsement blues. I always thought that whether it was Santorum or Huckabee, and now even Trump, that nobody's really played the populist card. I mean, Trump's come the closest to demagoguing that issue and playing them, but I still think it's overshadowed by some of his other stuff. I mean, there is, hay to be made. I don't know. There's fertile ground there, and to play up the trade thing, and I think that Trump has done the best job of anybody since Buchanan, but I still think he could have done it a little bit better. What do you make, Bill? Before we get going here, though, it's not just polls. It's not just polls about trade. I mean, there are polls. I mean, at Quinnipiac, I guess, is being called into question in terms of whether or not they're oversampling Republicans or something. But we are seeing polls that show Trump winning in Pennsylvania and some, important states. Are these outliers, or, could it be that the FBI stuff about Hillary lying really has done damage to her more than we even might have expected?
Well, I think the polls that have come out in the past couple of days, you have the Times poll that has a tie where it was a 6-point lead before, and you have several state polls. I should say there's a Marist national poll where Clinton's lead was down to 3, and a lot of state polls that had showed ties or a couple slight Trump leads. But there were 2 Pennsylvanians came out the same day. Quinnipiac, Trump up by 2, Marist, Clinton up by 9. So you got a big swing there. And you still, generally speaking, you still have very few Trump leads. And, you have Clinton up by 2 and 3 in a couple Iowa polls, Clinton up by 4 in Wisconsin, Clinton up by 10 in Colorado, 7 in Virginia, 7 in Michigan. Trump was up 3 in Florida. Now let's be real. Let's be fairly generous here. Okay, let's give Florida and Ohio to Trump. But with a 9 Clinton and a 2 Trump in Pennsylvania, I would still give Pennsylvania to Clinton as it stands today. If Trump doesn't get all 3 of those, if he loses Pennsylvania, he would need to win 2 or 3 of this group of states: Michigan, New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. Those are fairly blue states. And even in these polls, I mean, maybe he could pick off Iowa. But there's no evidence that he's really poised to take Michigan or Wisconsin, let alone New Hampshire, Minnesota. It's a pretty narrow map if he's not getting Pennsylvania too, and even Ohio and Florida are far from being locks for him.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, though, Bill, you could have. This is like the blue wall, and you could have said the exact same thing about any Republican candidate, and you could even argue that Trump is now better positioned to win those states than a generic Republican would have.
Well, the second point I make,
I do think
all these polls,
he seems to be faring better than we thought he might at this point.
In every poll I just mentioned to you, even the polls where he's ahead, he is not even touching 45. He is largely around 40 in every poll, whether it's tied or whether he's losing or whether he's up by a bit. The variation in all these polls is Hillary's number. Hillary has broken 50 in some of these polls. For example, the CBS New York Times poll went from 47-41 to 40-40. There really seems to be a pretty tough ceiling on Trump here. I mean, so clearly Hillary took a big hit with the FBI report, and that's moving folks into an undecided or a third-party camp. So even if Trump's able to drill that, I mean, I think it's highly questionable whether you can sustain an FBI argument here, or this is just an initial reaction to to the news. I mean, if he could, no evidence here that he's actually picking up swing voters. He's got to hope that you get this a third party resurgence from Johnson and Stein that makes it plausible. I still you're really talking an inside straight here for Trump. I would not look at this. I mean, obviously it's better than not having these numbers.
Well, I would
Trump,
love to see the counterfactual sort of argument, like what if Marco Rubio were in the race right now, the guy that I always thought would be the best to go against Hillary Clinton. If he were in the race right now, I would love to see how he was doing. And I think that logically speaking, he should be doing much better than Trump. But I'm not sure that would actually be the case.
Well, I think anyone would do better than Trump. I would assume anyone not Trump would be leading in polls coming off of the FBI stuff. I wouldn't necessarily say that means they're going to win. I think the direction of the economy is still what's most paramount here. But clearly, Trump was not the best foot forward for the Republican Party to put up.
All right. Well, on that, I think we agree. Check out Bill's stuff at RCP and Politico magazine, and check out my stuff at Roll Call, the Daily Caller, and the Matt Lewis and the News podcast. And follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. That is all.
We'll have to figure out if we can do this next week.
I'll be in Cleveland. Yeah. I'll be there. We're going to try to do the show. We'll still try to do the show if we can.
All right.
And then I think we'll both be in Philly. So we'll see how that goes.
Hopefully we can get together in Philly.
At the end, maybe the conclusion of the DMZ, we'll see us running up the Philadelphia Art Museum steps or something.
How do you want your cheesesteak? With Swiss or with Munster?
What did Kerry get? Whatever Kerry got
Swiss. I think we should get the Kerry special. They should sell John Kerry specials in Philly.
We'll go there. I'm going to put ketchup on mine. It's going to be fabulous. All right, buddy. Until next time, thanks for checking us out in the DMZ.